our last days, some people don't want to be seen in the hospital or in the on their deathbed, where I don't want to be a burden. I don't want people to see me like this. I feel ashamed. And I try to explain that, listen, this is sometimes what love looks like. There's nothing to be ashamed of. This is love. People want to love you. Let people love you.
Welcome, friends. In this episode of Insights at the Edge, my guest is Darnell Lamont Walker. Darnell is a death doula, someone who provides end-of-life accompaniment and support to individuals and families during the final stages of life. He's also an Emmy-nominated children's television writer and producer, and an acclaimed documentary filmmaker. Darnell is tremendously talented and generous of heart, and he's written a new book. It's called Never Say Goodbye: The Life of a Death Doula and the Art of a Peaceful End. Darnell, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I always love to hear the introduction. I'm like, that makes sense. That is me.
That's you.
That's me. That's me. Thanks for having me. I'm so honored to be here.
I'll tell you where I want to start, something that really got my attention. When you were 22 years old, you were told by a doctor, you should have been dead a month ago. Tell me what happened and also how that event has informed your life.
No, absolutely. So I was 22. I was having for about a month, from the beginning of October, I would walk maybe a couple of blocks and I was out of breath, really, really fast. And one day, and I'm 22, I'm thinking, I'm at the height of health, 22-year-olds don't die, this whole thing. And one day, I woke up and I couldn't walk. And this is a month into, being short of breath, walking upstairs, being short of breath, just taking a walk down the block. Couldn't understand what was happening. But I woke up and couldn't walk. And again, didn't relate the two, but decided if tomorrow is this bad, then I'll go to the doctor. And the next day was worse. And so I went to the hospital and thinking I pulled a groin, I pulled a muscle in my groin. And possibly in my calf. And he comes back and he says, "How long have you been out of breath?" After running the test. And I say, since last month, the beginning of October. And he says, "Oh, you should have been dead a month ago. You have 16 clots going from your ankle all the way up into your lungs. And at least one of those should have killed you." And I'm thinking, oh, well, it didn't. So let's get me back to optimum health, And so we get there and eventually, but that moment for me showed me that, one, at any moment we could go. Two, how precious life is and how precious life should be. Like now, having to face that mortality, having to say, oh, I could be dead at any given moment. And this is something now that I live with, going forward. This is something that I have to go see my hematologist every year and hear her say, "Oh, glad you're still here. How can we keep you moving forward?" But because of that, I live a fantastic, I'm so sorry about that. I live a fantastic life. And I'm just so honored to be able to say, I choose to make this Tuesday or it's Wednesday, to make this Wednesday bright. And I choose to make this Wednesday as great and as colorful and as beautiful as possible, instead of waking up and just merely existing. So there's this difference between, for me, between living and existing. And that diagnosis, that moment helped me see what that difference is. Um, and yeah, and so, having to face their mortality. And I talk a lot about that. I talk a lot to people. I'm just saying, when you having to face that mortality and how much it helps us live the life that we deserve to live. Like I told a friend yesterday, I said, we'd all be so blessed to be diagnosed with something that could kill us at any moment.
That's why I wanted to start the conversation there, because I think this idea of living with an awareness that death can come at any moment, it's very powerful. And in reading your book and in getting to learn more about your life story, you're a tremendously creative, adventurous, fun, loving, joyful person. And I thought to myself, some of this must come from the fact that Darnell is aware
Mm-hmm.
that he could really go at any moment.
Yep.
His blood clots, he could go at any moment. And so my question is, how do people live with that kind of awareness without having to have the kind of medical condition, I'm sorry, that you have?
Yeah, no, it's about being intentional. It's about honoring the moment, and it doesn't have to be this thing that we recognize and pay close attention to every day. Every day I don't think about this. There are days or weeks that might pass, and it wasn't a thought in my mind that at any moment I could go. But when it does come, it's a moment that I honor and I say, oh, that's true about me. That's a thing. Maybe today I should do something that I want to do, or maybe now that I've recognized that, maybe I should do something beautiful and meaningful and honor this moment. And I think that's what it is. There are moments that come for everyone, that when we're alone, like even before this, there were moments where I'd be alone in my room at night and I'd say, what if tonight's the last night? And then I'd journal or find something the next day that, oh, I should go to the bookstore tomorrow and find a book that I really want to read in case the time goes. And so it's about honoring those moments when they come. We don't have to live in this constant fear that we could die at any second. But when it does come, sit with it, savor that moment and say, okay, glad that's here. This is what I'm going to do. Mhm.
You were an unusual kid. I read that at 13, you were volunteering at a hospice and home care facility after school. And I
Mhm.
thought, God, I've never met a 13-year-old who was a hospice volunteer. They're off going to some sporting, gymnastics, something or other.
Yeah.
What brought you to want to volunteer at a hospice at 13?
Yeah, it's strange how my life lined up that way. Like I didn't volunteer at the place because it was a hospice. Although, looking back, it's wild to see all the dots that are connected. But my friends were working, had real job. I had a couple years older than me. They were getting, work permits at Hardee's and McDonald's and all these things. And I wanted to work, but I couldn't because I was too young. And I remember the public access channel that just flipped through with ads of the things that were happening in the city all the time. And I was sitting there watching it one day, and it said that they needed volunteers. And I thought, well, maybe I could volunteer. So after school, I went up there and I did it because it was a job. And my job was to help residents do arts and crafts and make toast and change calendars in the rooms. But while I was doing it, I'd go into the rooms and they asked me to sit with them for a while because they hadn't had visitors in however long. Or I'd be able to be I was the person who was able to be there for them when others weren't coming. And even then, at 13, I didn't think I was doing anything spectacular or necessary. I just thought, oh, this is what I do. This is what people do. Yeah, sure, I'll sit here and play checkers or Monopoly with you, or play cards, or just sit and talk with you. And I learned so much from those people there. And it was such a beautiful time that now when I look back, I think, oh, well, of course, this is where all of that led me. This is where all of those things brought me to this work. I've been doing it since then. But yeah, it wasn't. wasn't on purpose, I'll say, but it was what was aligned, you know.
And early in your life, though, you noticed an affinity that you had for being with people who were in the dying process. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mostly because I was with my grandma. You know, I spent every if it was possible, I would have spent every waking hour with her, and she recognized early that I was, I think, maybe the only one in the family who wasn't afraid to talk about death besides her. And so when she was helping people, you know, and doing the work that, you know, death doulas do, although she wasn't a death doula by title, um, I was I was able to be there with her. You know, her friends. We had her sister when I was a kid. When I was 9, about as early as I recognized that in me. Um, and then, you know, 13 also was the year I had a cousin, her nephew, who came home to die, and she says, "Well, you can come to my house. I'll take care of you." And it was me and her there taking care of him when other family members didn't want to be around because this was the height of the AIDS epidemic. People were or weren't informed, um, you know, and it was tough. But that was the first time I was able to have this hands-on experience with the end of life, and say, "This is how we take care of people. This is what we do when we love people. This is what it is to witness um, people at their end." And it kind of stayed with me. I took that to school when um, the first time I had a friend die, and the schools weren't very resourceful. They just said, "Yeah, if you want to talk to the guidance counselor, come on in. Otherwise, have a nice day." And I was able to say, "Well, maybe we should talk about her at lunch and or at recess, and we should do something." And I was able to bring that into that as well. And so it kind of carried on from, 9 years old until now.
You mentioned how close you were with your grandma and that she didn't have anything like a professional title
Mhm.
called death doula, and really that's a profession that has come in under that title only really in recent years, at least that I started hearing it, and yet it's a function in families, communities, culture. It's a function that has always been played, and I wonder if you can speak to that, the professionalizing of death doula and its ordinary heart flowing function in
Yeah,
communities.
no, absolutely. You're right. I hadn't heard the term until about 10 years ago, 2015, fall of 2015, when I was talking to a hospice nurse after telling her these experiences, that I'm talking about with you. And she says, "Oh, it sounds like you're a death doula." And I look it up and I'm like, "I've never heard this before, but this is exactly what I've been doing since I was a kid." And then I had to think, like, this is exactly what my grandmother, my mother, my grandmother's mother, like all these people in my family have been doing this work for, centuries. Um, and it's interesting to see what is happening, the professionalizing of it. That people are going to get certified in this thing that we once, it was, this is what you do for love. This is what you do when you love someone. And I'm not against that. I have a certification. It's not necessary. It's I tell people that you get certified when you want to figure out how to run it as a business. Otherwise, you are more than welcome to go volunteer at a hospice and learn this work just as, just as fast or even more so with the hands-on work rather than the classroom work. The professionalizing of it has, made it has put it into the lexicon of the world now, and not against that at all. Like I love. I have friends who are running their certification programs that are doing amazing work. We're getting more people out there. People are paying attention, and we get more people um, who don't have to be alone at the end now that this is happening. Um, it adding that title lets people has shown people that, oh, it feels special, to a lot of people, and they say, oh, this thing exists. And so people are being called in to be there at the end for a lot of folks, and I'm grateful for that. My big thing is I just don't want people to be alone, and I've carried that with me since I was at that hospice at 13, and I'm seeing that this is allowing for that to happen.
What do you think about the idea, Darnell, and I'm sure you've had this experience, that some people actually want to be alone, like they choose the moment to die when no one else is there?
Oh yeah, I've seen that even for my grandmother, and I have clients who will wait for the family or whoever is there to leave to do it. And I think a lot of times it's all about the reasoning. I'm If that's what you want to do, I'm completely here for that. A lot of times, so many of us we feel death is a burden, right? It feels like death is this thing we don't want to have to put off on someone. And so it's like, I don't want them to have to carry that around. Let me do it while they're not here. And I've had people say that to me. I've had clients say that to me, like, I don't want anyone in the room because I don't want them to be haunted by that, final sight. I know people who don't want to be, in our last days, some people don't want to be seen in the hospital or on their deathbed. Um, and I understand, and I try to explain that. Listen, this is sometimes what love looks like. When my grandfather was dying, I was there for him, and I remember it was a fast decline right at the end, and I had to help um, change his bed sheets and get him out of bed and put a new gown on him. And he's like, I don't want you to see me like this. And I had to remind him that this is what love looks like. And I am honored to be able to see him like this. When people tell me they want to be alone, I like to ask why. And then if it's one of those reasons where I don't want to be a burden, I don't want people to see me like this, I feel ashamed, then I try to work with that and say, there's nothing to be ashamed of. This is love. People want to love you. Let people love you. That's and a lot of times you see that shift where it's like, oh, you're right. You're right.
You've sat at the bedside now of many dying people. You write about it in Never Can Say Goodbye, the stories of your experience with these people. And I wonder if you could share, here's a couple of the big themes. And this is just a general question,
Mhm.
Darnell, that I've learned firsthand from being there. This is what I've learned. This is what I've come to know.
Mhm. Yeah. So, you know, um, one for sure is that people in what I've come to know is that people in the end want to share pieces of themselves. They want to be asked those questions that we sometimes avoid asking them. They want to be reminded of things, and they don't want to leave this place with so much inside that could help others. And by that I mean, I've had I've had clients who tell their family, ask me whatever questions you want to know the answer to. Um, I'm a writer, and a lot of what I do in this work is I want to come in and help share the story and maybe help them find closure in sharing that story. And so a lot of times I come in and they say, I want to write about this because this is what I want my family to know. No one's ever asked me this. No one's ever talked to me about this part of my life. Um, I have these things I want to tell my daughter. I want to tell my husband. I want to tell my wife. And and I see the load that's lifted off of them when it's asked, and not just for them, but also for the family that's left behind. It's a thing for them too. It's to say, oh, something they've been carrying around for years. And I've seen what happens when they don't get to do that. I've seen what happens when they're afraid to ask those questions. I had a client recently who her daughter wanted to ask questions, but was afraid to do it, not knowing, like these are her last days. I don't want her to feel, ashamed or bothered by them. But I also, after talking with the mom, she wanted her daughter to ask these questions. So now I'm mediating that thing. Um, and so that's one. Another, of course, are the regrets. People die with these regrets that I'm working toward helping people lessen those or find ways to face their mortality and live a life where if there's a way to lighten that then let's get to that work. There's so many people who are saying, I wish I had lived the life that I wanted to live, not the life that I wanted to live to make this person happy. And that keeps showing up. It's like I lived a life like I had one client who lived a life to make his grandmother's dreams come true. He was there at the end of her life, and she told him, and he told her that he's like, I wanted to have all these things for you before you died, and I'm sorry I couldn't get those. And she says, I'd never wanted any of that. She's like, I just wanted you to be happy. I wanted you to live your life. And he's telling me this from his deathbed. And he says, I never got to do that because I was so focused on that. And here I am now. He's like, so now I just need to pass this information down to my nephews so they don't do what I did. And so I'm grateful to be able to be there and to pass that message down to his nephews and to pass that message to everyone. These are lessons that I learned from each of my clients, that I get to bring into the world. Like even as a, children's television writer, I get to somehow incorporate these into scripts. And maybe it's not about death, but I can get that same message across. Like you live your life, do these things that you want to do now.
I want to go back to the first observation you made about how people are carrying, I'll use my language, a certain gift or medicine or something inside of them, and they want to be sure to give it, to tell their story, what they learned, the wisdom they discovered before they die. And I know you teach storytelling workshops and storytelling as a preparation to die. And one thing I heard you say that really got my attention is that one of the prompts you offer at the beginning of some of these workshops is tell your life story to me in 3 sentences.
Mhm.
And I thought, that's really good. I wonder where Darnell came up with that. And as I was driving around, I did come up with how I would tell my life story.
Mhm.
But I'm going to ask you,
Yeah.
Darnell, tell me your life story in 3 sentences. What would they
Oops.
be?
My life story in 3 sentences would be he came into this world very curious, didn't quite figure it out along the way, but knows it will all make sense in the end. And those are my 3 sentences. Because I gave up long ago trying to find the answer to all these big questions that I have, because I know that I see that spark in people on their deathbed where they say, "Oh, that was why that happened," and that's where it hits. That's where it lands. If it lands sooner, if it lands tomorrow, and I'm still here, fine. But I see that a lot of this stuff will figure it out in the end. And I love that exercise. I've had it from a teacher. randomly. I don't even remember the teacher that taught me that, but I've been able to evolve it and say, tell me your life in 3 sentences, and then help people to I guide them into making those 3 sentences into a full story. Yes, some have written memoirs from this, and it's such a beautiful thing. It's like, okay, well, now you have just think about the theme of your life. Just thinking about themes again. Um, think about the themes of your life. What are these relationships? What are these, this profession you chose, or these big ideas, or whatever that is. How do those things tell a full story? And in those three, you have a full story in there a lot of times, and it's your beginning, middle, and not necessarily the end, but where you are now. And if you don't like where you are now, then these 3 sentences also give you a chance to look at that and say, oh, I can change how this goes from now. And a lot of time, most of the time, that's what happens. It's like, oh, I don't like this at all. I can pivot now. And it's, yeah, you can.
Now, you mentioned sometimes people can write a whole memoir just
Mhm.
from these 3 sentences that are movements in their life. And I know that a lot of people in the Sounds True audience are wanting to write their life story,
Mhm.
but they run up against certain blocks or obstacles like, okay, does it have to get published? Who's going to read it? Am I really just writing this for myself? There's so many places I don't want to go historically. Like, here you are, you're both a writer and a death doula. People need to spill themselves out before they die in
Yeah.
story form. What do you suggest, Darnell?
You one I tell everyone has a story to tell. Everyone has a story to tell, and everyone has a story worth telling, and people are ready to listen. We are not alone in this. We That inner critic tells us that we're not a good writer. We are alone. No one cares about what we have to say. Our grammar is horrible. We can't spell. All this, you know, crazy stuff that this inner critic tells us. The first thing I do when I lead these workshops, the very first thing I do is have people, fight against that inner critic slash affirm themselves. So write down everything that you need to hear um, as a writer, because now, as soon as you pick up that pen and that paper, or you pull that computer up, you are now a writer. So write down everything you need to hear to encourage you to not stop, and then don't edit as you go. And the big thing is that if you don't write this story will never exist in any other way. Like, no one else can tell this. So if you leave here without telling this story, then no one will ever know it. And we need your words. We really need your words. And so I tell people that all the time. I think it's our way in. And as soon as and this is for me too. Like, I'm a writer. I've been awarded, and have a published book and things, but I have to do this work every time I sit down to write something. This is not a thing that goes away. I don't think I called myself a writer. I've been writing since I was 7. I don't think I called myself a writer till maybe 10 years ago. Actually, 10 years ago this year. And I was like, okay, I guess people say I'm a writer. I guess I'm a writer. And by then, I'd been writing plays and poetry and everything. And so we have to affirm ourselves. We have to fight against that thing that tells us these stories aren't worthy. I do a lot of, when I go to bookstores, I go through the memoir section and find memoirs by people I've never heard of, that most of us have never heard of, because it shows me that they too have a story. Like, this story is important. And I love that. And I read it, and now I'm like, oh, yes. And now I know this person, and I needed their words, and I share it with everyone who I know also needs their words. So people are waiting for it. People are waiting for your story.
Now, Darnell, I also work in publishing. And
Mhm.
what I would say from that perspective for a moment is we don't need more memoirs on the shelves that are going to sell 500 copies or 200 copies, or at least publishers don't want to
Mhm.
invest
Mhm.
in the printing and marketing, et cetera. So how does somebody who writes their story, who may not be
Yeah.
social media influencer with lots of fans who are ready to buy it, how do they get their story actually heard?
Yeah.
If
It's
it because it's not gonna be through traditional publishing,
Oh,
most likely.
absolutely, absolutely. And it's sometimes it's that story is not for the world. Sometimes that story is for your family. Like I said, I come in, and a large part of what I do is to help people tell their story, and it's not for the masses. It's for their nieces and their son and their daughters and mothers and whoever is left who they feel can benefit from that. And so we don't have to produce for Barnes and Noble. It could be for our friends down the block. It's like I want to leave this printed out pieces of paper that I've folded and stapled at the edges, and I want to leave a copy of this for everyone. A lot of people we journal, and it's like, well, what happens to your journals when you die? And most of my friends are like, they all burn, but some of them are like, I want these to pass down to um, my kids if they want to read them, and so that's who we leave these stories for. It doesn't have to go on the shelves, and self-publishing. If you Self-publishing is a thing. There are places you can go to self-publish. There are many sites where you don't have to spend a dime, and you could just put it out and sell your books for $3 a piece if you want to do it that way. But the important part is leaving the story here for others to use. And I talk often about dying empty. Like if it's inside of you, it has to come out. It should come out. Die empty. I don't want to leave this place with anything inside, anything I should have written. I don't want to be on my deathbed thinking, "Oh, I should have written this." I am quite sure that if I'm fortunate enough to have a deathbed, I will be there, and I'm still responsive, and I can still move around writing down little notes or having my phone, telling it to take notes because there's going to be things that I still want to come out, and hopefully someone will carry that torch for me. Um, but that's it. It's like it has to come out some way, and if that's however it's going to happen. If I write another book and the publisher doesn't want it, I'm still going to write it, and it's still going to exist somewhere because it has to.
What do you think about the need people have to confess and how that comes up at the end of life? And I'm using this word very intentionally, confess. There's
Mhm.
something that I feel guilty about or something that I've been hiding, a secret, but I need to get this out.
Oh yeah, it's all of that. We don't want to die with that pain inside. Like that, those things that we feel we need to confess are often painful for us, for the person we might need to confess it to, and we don't. We know that this thing is final. When you reach that end, it's like, oh, this is it. If I don't do this, then it will never happen. These people might not ever have these answers, or they will never know this about me. And we see as we get older for sure, but also at the end you see just how unnecessary it was, or maybe it was in the beginning, but now it's not so necessary to keep that in. And if confessing it can bring us any closer to peace, any closer to someone else's peace, or bring someone else close as possible to the peace that they need, or the healing they need, or the joy they need, then we are, if this is what I can give you now, then I'm going to give it to you. And it also goes to, in a time where we don't have much control, over what's happening, death, then this confession kind of gives us at least a little bit of control over something. And so often, so many people look for as much of that as possible, and then it's like, okay, well, let me do this too, so you know that I'm still here. Um, yeah, I think it's a beautiful thing. I've seen, you know, beautiful things happen on a deathbed. Relationships that uh, were broken for 20 years, have been mended because of a confession or an apology or I was wrong, you know, whatever that is. But it's necessary.
Another thing I'm curious about, as someone who has really thought about dying quite a lot, is if you've experienced when you're at the bedside, spirits or ancestors gathering in the room, if that's something you yourself have palpably felt.
Mhm. Not for me. I've never felt it for my clients, um, but I've seen them experience it for themselves. And my grandmother, most of my clients, I remember sitting with one client who we were in full conversation. I'm talking to him about music. He was a musician, and we're talking about music, and then he stops and looks over to the right, and then starts a full conversation over this way. And by now, I know that his grandmother would visit him, and I say, "Oh, is your grandma here?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, she's right there. Can't you see her?" And I'm like, "No, I can't, but I'm glad she's here for you." And so I've seen it often. I've never seen it for clients. I've seen it for myself, of course, not on my deathbed, but I've seen spirits for myself. And even when I was at the very beginning of this journey, that's when my grandmother's sister was dying. That's how I knew her time was coming to an end, because they came home from the hospital and told me that, she said her mama came to see her, and her mom had been dead for years. And at 9, I'm thinking, a, a dead person came to see her. Oh, that must mean she's about to die too. And have I've seen it countless times since, to deny it, and good for them. I always ask people, friends. It's one way into conversations that I have. I say, well, who do you want to come back for you? When it's your time to go, who do you want to be standing there welcoming you to that next place? Yeah.
Is your sense that there are spirit allies of some form that come and help us at the time of our dying?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's love that comes back. I have a friend who tells the story of her dad when her dad was dying, and she asked him, she's like, who do you want it to be? Because he had seen, his grandfather and uh, his mother experienced this on their deathbed. And she says, who do you want to come back? And he's like, oh, I want, my dog that I had when I was, 8. And then on his deathbed, he sees the other dog. And he's like, no, no. And he's talking, he's like, not that dog. It's, and it's like, oh, well, dang, but it's still a good enough dog to come back for him. But I think, yes, that is my sense, that it is love that comes back for us and makes that transition out a bit easier.
Okay, I'm just gonna ask you your perspective on it, which is somebody might say, "Yeah, we make this stuff up so that we can feel good, and it's part of what we make up in the dying process, the forms that love comes back in." And
Mhm.
I'm just curious what you think about that, or if your sense is like, actually, that's not what people aren't making it up, it's happening to them.
Yeah, no, I've seen it happen for people who are very, very much who go to the end, very much saying, no, I don't believe all that. That's not going to happen. And then watch them interact with these folks who come back for them. Um, and to like, I personally cannot believe that it's made up. I have seen it. Even when my grandmother's sister, who I just explained, she said, Mama came for me, and she said she's coming back tomorrow. They're just getting my room ready. And that next day is when she died, with my grandmother. Very, very similar thing. And so I knew when she was going because of how it happened. Um, every client I know, many of them have given, they've seen these spirits, they've seen these people who come back for them, and they've given, far too many details. They've died exactly when they said they were going to die, when this person was going to come back for them. So I can't personally believe that, but because I've seen it, and I've felt it. And being connected to that world myself, it's just such a, you know, beautiful thing to have one, and I'm grateful that they do have that. And so I couldn't accept that, but and I hope someone comes back for us all, even those of us who don't believe it, even for those of us who believe it's made up, that it's a trick of the brain. Whatever it is, I'm glad it's happening.
Okay, you used this interesting phrase. I really liked it, dying empty.
Mhm.
And we've talked some, okay, confessing, writing your story. But for that person who has the sense of, there's all this stuff I didn't do that I wanted to do. There's all this unlived life, unlived dreams. How do you help people make peace with that?
That's the hard part. It's, sometimes you can't, honestly. Sometimes you can't help people make peace with the things they didn't get a chance to do. Or, I had a client recently who just wanted to put on a backpack and go through Italy one more time, but on their deathbed, knowing it couldn't happen. So we travel through these moments of, okay, you didn't get to do this, but let's talk about all the amazing things you did get to do. Let's talk about all the people who you've encouraged to do exactly that thing that you wanted to do, you didn't get to do, but now they can. It's these folks are coming back to share their stories, to share, how you helped me, how beautiful my life is because of you. Um, Even because of your, sometimes it's a sacrifice. Sometimes they didn't get to do it because they had to sacrifice for someone else who did get to have this beautiful thing. Um, but sometimes, honestly, you don't get to have that moment where it's like, oh, I made peace with that, with not doing it. Sometimes it's just I didn't get to do that, and I hate that I didn't get to do it. And I'm going to die knowing that. Um, and honestly, I talk a lot about. I don't think any of us get to the end without regrets. I think we have them, but I think if we can remember more beauty and more, you know, uh, greatness and the things we did get to do, I try to hold on to those also. And then, for those who are listening to this, there's still time. For those who are out there saying, "Oh, I didn't get to. I want to go through Italy and I want to do this." If you can do it, do it. There's still time, and that's a thing. I like to drive home the fact that we don't have time. We don't have as much time as we want. And so if you are still able, do it now or do it when you can, plan to do it, and hopefully you get to it.
The subtitle of Never Can Say Goodbye, The Life of a Death Doula and the Art of a Peaceful End. It's that last part
Mhm.
of the subtitle that I wanted to ask you about, the notion of a peaceful end. It seems to me that at times death can be a mess, a messy process, not particularly peaceful. So, what do you mean by a peaceful end?
Yes, death can be very chaotic, very very violent a lot of times, and very messy. The peaceful end, like my goal as a death doula, is to come in, find out how you want to die, and that's actually my first question: is how do you want to die? And try to get them as close to that death as possible.
But Darnell, let me ask you a question about that,
Yeah,
because whenever I, just in casual conversations like most people and talk, how do you want everybody wants to die in their sleep peacefully, blah, 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 and
yeah.
it just doesn't happen most of the time.
At most of the time, it does not. But what does happen is now we start that conversation, and now you're thinking about it. And although it may not happen, there's a chance that it could, but it may not. But you start planning for that. You start planning this life up until that moment. Um, all these beautiful things unravel up until that moment. Even if it's a car accident, you're like, oh, I want to die at 80 in my garden, surrounded by my family, holding my hand. But it's a car accident. But up until that car accident, you were headed toward that very peaceful end that you imagined. And so there's so much beauty that happens in there, and that can happen in there if we are intentional about it. And so even when my client, I each of my they all have a way they want to go. Like, my last client, she wanted a party. She wanted it to be at a party, surrounded by family, everyone wearing purple, and having a good time. And she didn't get that, but she did get the party planning. She did get to the, who's going to be there, who do I not want to be there, what foods do I want, will everyone wear purple? And she did. She died 2 weeks before, actually, 2 weeks, yeah, a week and a half before the party happened. um, but it happened to be Thanksgiving. She died the day after Thanksgiving, but Thanksgiving, a lot of family came and they were able to do everything that she hoped they would do at the party. And so the planning still happened, and she still found the happiness and peace in that planning, even though she didn't get the death that she necessarily wanted. And so, yeah, most of us, no one wants to. I've known one person actually who wanted to die in the hospital, but no one wants to die in the hospital. And so when I talk to people, they're like, "Oh, I want to be at home and I want to be this," but the chances are, they will die in the hospital if it comes to that. And but everything leading up to that moment brought them some form of peace. Hopefully, if they've done it with intention, if they've honored the moment, if they've um, done the work, they can find peace in those moments.
So you're saying, if I understand correctly, just let me see, that it's okay to find peace in a fantasy that very well may not happen.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's that it's that audacity of hope type of situation where it's like hope is dangerous, but but it's there. And so this may not happen, but this is what I want. And okay, let me start getting these pieces in order. And so once I have them in order, it's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna have that. But then things unfold in ways that we can't imagine, and we don't get it. But for up until then, there was that thing of like, oh, this is going to be much different than the way my mom died or the way my grandfather died, in a very unplanned, had never talked about death kind of way.
After someone dies, as a death doula, you also help the family with grieving. And you have this great line, so I want to bring it forward because I wrote it down and I'm going to keep it with me. Grief is the sequel to love.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's kind of obvious, but it helped me as somebody who has gone through periods of my life of tremendous grief.
Mhm.
Know, oh, that's also a sign of the deep love that I've had in this situation.
No, absolutely. It's when we love. I mean, it's just it's what we're left with. It's you grieve. We grieve what we lost. Yeah, it shows that we loved correctly, or a lot of times it shows that it was this. And not saying that the deeper the grief, the deeper the love. That's not true at all. But it shows that we love this person, we love this thing, we held on to it, we honored it, and now they're gone, it's gone, and all of this pain. Um, and grief isn't always pain. Grief can sometimes be many other things, but we're left with that, and it was because we loved. We loved, you know, and it's as simple as that. Um, I think about the many people that I lost, and I know that when it's time for them to go, it's going to be hard. When my grandmother died, it was hard, but I am so filled with the thought of how I loved her, and it's what gets me through. And it's the price we pay. It's the price we pay for being able to have those moments with those folks, um, to have those beautiful days and stories and memories. We have to have that thing that comes after those things are gone and those people are gone, which is grief.
In a conversation, someone asked you, how do you decide which projects to work on? You're making films, you're writing for various TV shows, you're doing this doula work. How do you decide? And you answered, my overarching theme, my overarching goal is to help people find, you ready for this?
Mm-hmm.
Joy, to help people find joy.
Yep.
And here you've written a book, Never Can Say Goodbye, all about being at the bedside of people dying and the grieving process. And somehow it brings people to joy.
Yeah.
The book brings people to joy. And I wonder if you can speak to that, how going through being present for death and helping people grieve brings joy.
Yeah. It's, I always talk about, like, I try to take people, I serve as this bridge, right? Where I hope I'm someone who gets people from where they are to where they want to be. And I hope, a lot of times where we want to be is the joy. Um, but there is joy in that. There's joy in going through that and realizing that, oh, I loved, again, going back to that. Oh, I loved. I um, can, this transition doesn't have to be what it was for all these folks who came before me. It um, doesn't have to be tough. It doesn't have to be any of that. I can, oh, I can plan. I can do these things. I wrote this book letting people know that they too have done the work. They've already done the work for other people. They've helped people find peace in the end, and find love and closure, and all of that. And like all of that leads us to this place, hopefully, where we can say, huh, you know, I'm glad that happened. I'm glad I had it. It didn't work out. Sometimes it didn't work out the way I wanted it to, but I'm glad I had that. Um, and for me, all of that, everything in this book, everything I've experienced, facing my own mortality, losing some of the people in my life who I thought would never die. You know, Even in that, it's like, oh, and I sit back and I honor those moments, and I think about them, I'm filled with so much joy that I got to have those moments though. And I want that for us all. Even when I sit down, like deciding which projects, I sit down and I write these kid shows, and it's like they're all about, like, whether I'm writing for kids, whether I'm helping, folks die, it's all about transitions, and it's all about getting people from where they are to where they are going. And it's, for me, that's getting it out there, and that's helping them also find that peace in the end, and that happiness and that love and that joy. And it's really all about that for me. It's I want us all to experience it, and maybe it's a huge goal to really have, and but I think it's possible. I think it really is, if we can just move toward it.
This is what love looks like. To end, I'd be curious to know in your own life, this is what love looks like, what you've done to live into that sentence that you found really challenging. Didn't come naturally to you, but you did it anyway.
Mm-hmm. This is what love looks like. Love looks like going into the hard moments, going into the very difficult corners and the darkness, and saying, I am here, and I don't know if this will break me. I don't know if I will make it out of here, but I am here, and I am here because I know that I'm not alone. It's finding the courage to say that and to believe that, but to show up there and not be ashamed of being afraid, and not being um, finding any guilt in that, but just showing up. Love looks like showing up in all the moments, and welcoming others to do the same.
Darnell Lamont Walker, author of the new book, Never Can Say Goodbye, The Life of a Death Doula and the Art of a Peaceful End. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your big heart, tremendous creativity, all you pour out. Thank you.
Much. I appreciate it so much. I am so honored, and thank you all for listening. Yeah, that's it. Show up and fight. And for those who want to write, I drive it home. Fight that inner critic. Affirm yourselves, and we need your stories. They are worth listening to, worth reading and hearing.
Thank you, Darnell.
Thank you.